This is an origin reading for Speak to Heaven. So I have 3 crystals here for this reading. I've already surrounded us in protective space since your guides had to give me your code name. So I'm probably not going to do that again, but these are the 3 crystals that I drew for this reading. So this is my Angel Aura crystal, Angel Aura Quartz crystal. So this is actually a throat chakra stone, and it also has to do with connecting to angels, to the angelic realm, and it's also specifically having to do with healing. So most of the throat chakra stones, they don't focus on healing so much. They focus on attributes of the throat chakra, different strengths, intuition, creativity. But this one really focuses on healing, connecting to angels, but it's still associated with the throat chakra. And so I obviously, especially, I think of it as healing those specific qualities that the throat chakra brings through, and also healing and maintaining that specific chakra as well. Okay, so then I also have my Fuchsite here. So Fuchsite also has to do with healing, now that I think of it. So this is more of a heart chakra stone, as you can see by all the green, but this also has to do with healing, and it has to do with gathering information. So it helps you to know exactly what needs to be healed, whether it's past life information, whether it's information about a specific area of your body or a specific thing that you're doing that's causing some kind of damage. And this can be really in any kind of way. It can be emotional, it can be a belief, it can be something physical, it can be financial even, it can be any kind of thing, any situation that needs to be healed. That you need information about. So that's really what the Fuchsite helps with. And then I have here my Shadakite. So Shadakite is a really grounding stone. It's an earth energy stone. And again, there's a lot of healing energies with this stone. And specifically, it uses its grounding energies to heal, and it's energies that are so connected to the earth to heal. And then also it's very connected to the third eye and the crown chakra and all types of different psychic abilities, connecting to guides, all of that. Okay, so I am actually going to go ahead and surround us in some more protective space, which I just do with visualization. And this is also a way that I kind of connect to your guides a little bit better and get a stronger connection going here and see what they have to say. Okay, so firstly, it feels like there's a lot of potential with your third eye, your crown chakra, this area. Maybe that's part of the reason that they gave you this code name. I'm not 100% sure, but there's a lot of potential in this area, but it does feel like there's some kind of block going on here where you're not fully tapping into it yet. So I feel like there's a lot more potential than what you're currently using. It feels like you need to develop it more, even though it does feel like it's naturally there. And then there's also this feeling like you're an old soul. And on the one hand, you have been sort of spiritual your entire life, you've been intuitive your whole life, and in some ways you've been open to spiritual types of concepts. But at the same time, there's also this feeling that some of this is kind of new to you. So some concepts in spirituality do feel newer, and it feels almost like there's a kind of transitioning phase where you're coming, how do I say, mm, almost like more and more into your current belief structure that you have. So sometimes we also have to let go of old beliefs, or even we just sometimes have to realize something and almost there's a feeling like realize what our beliefs have been all along. Because like they were already saying, you've carried this with you your whole life. You're an old soul, so this means you've had a lot of past life experiences, and so these are things that you already innately knew, but at the same time they have to be triggered in a sense, or you have to consciously realize them. So that's been more and more coming to the surface, and it feels like especially in the last, like, I want to say couple of years or few years, it feels like you've really been stepping into that more and more, into who you are right now and your current beliefs that you have right now. And also your guides are saying that these current beliefs are much more in alignment with your true self, and with bringing that through, and also with allowing your abilities up. You definitely have a lot of them. You definitely have the ability to you definitely have clairvoyance. And actually, Shattuckite is a very clairvoyant stone. I know I was saying it helps with all these different psychic abilities, but I definitely think of this as a kind of healer stone and a clairvoyant stone as well. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of clearing here as well. There are some blocks in your chakras. Doesn't feel like really serious blocks, but it almost does feel like sometimes you do almost push against your own nature a little bit, or you kind of um, have at times tried to almost push your spirituality away. But it feels like this is your nature and this is going to come through regardless. Okay, so you've definitely had some lifetimes as a fairy. Now, I don't feel like that's your origin, but you have definitely had some fairy lifetimes. So there's a very magical quality to fairies. There's a feeling like they can pretty much do anything in some ways. They can morph time. They can kind of snap their fingers and cause some kind of time warp or just crazy magical things to happen. They just don't live in our sense of space and time. And they're also a little bit more mischievous than, let's say, an angel or something. So not as many rules really apply to them. They're okay with making practical jokes. Not in like a harmful way unless there are some really negative type of fairy. It's still in a helpful way. Um, and then, of course, on occasion, it's more helpful to them, maybe not as much to you. But still, that's almost a perception thing. So if it's a positive fairy, still in the long run, it is something that is helpful, even if we don't always understand it or accept it that way. So a fairy, for instance, might make you lose your keys, or you might forget things, but that's more to say, hey, pay attention. Hey, think about where you're going. Or they're kind of giving this, for instance, like let's say you're in a very negative train of thought, and then all of a sudden you stumble over some rock or something, you stub your toe, and it hurts a little, but it's not like you fall down and break your leg. You stumble a little bit, you trip up, and you have that second where you can think, wait a minute, what am I thinking about? And your guides are pointing out that we tend to think of that as law of attraction, which is true as well, but sometimes it is actually a fairy, or it is like some kind of helper who is pointing something out to you in a harmless way, but getting your attention in more how we would kind of perceive as a negative way. And your guides are also saying that sometimes something a little bit negative happening actually gets your attention much more than something more positive. Because negative things annoy us. They stick out to us in this emotional way, like I'm annoyed by that, and so we have to think about something. It can trigger us to say, okay, what caused that? What was I doing wrong? What was I thinking about? Or what was I feeling about? Or what was I about to do? And you kind of catch yourself. Another thing that your guides are mentioning is repeating numbers. Seeing repeating positive numbers. To almost let you know, okay, you're on the right train of thought. Or maybe you hear a siren or something going off. repeatedly, when you are thinking about something negative, or in other words, when you're about to manifest something negative out of your thoughts. Maybe a siren goes by and you think about that. So your guides are saying, okay, so this would be in response to question 4. So they're saying they're always speaking with you. They're always communicating with you. It's just sometimes you don't know the way that they are doing that. So sometimes you can interpret it as something else when really it's a guide. And of course, sometimes people just get annoyed that they tripped and fell, right? And they don't really observe, okay, what was I putting my focus and my attention on? They just get more annoyed. And then they attract worse things. Okay, so that's when, the stumbling hasn't helped, and now you just end up attracting something bad. And that can get your attention as well. And in that case, most likely they allowed that, but they didn't cause it. You were the one that caused it because you stepped out of your vibration and you stepped into this other train of thought. So your guides are saying that they're constantly guiding you. They're constantly giving their input. And they're using your intuition to do that as well. And sometimes when they're speaking to you, it even just seems like your own thoughts. You get some inspiration to write a book or do something creative or inspiring. And there is almost a feeling of like writing something down and doing something like creative or almost like emotionally expressive. So something artistic, it feels like sometimes this is actually them giving you that idea or giving you that inspiration or that flow of thoughts. There is a feeling with you almost like there is an ability to write, to communicate in some kind of written way where you're writing things down and you're communicating in this more kind of poetic or kind of storytelling way. So this is definitely a gift that would reside in the throat chakra. You definitely have a lot of fairies around you. And higher positive ones, obviously, I'm referring to here. And guides, you have some fairy guides. So there's a feeling, though, that these energies are not so much the guides, but other fairies that are just around you. Obviously, guides have contracted with you before you even came here. But these other fairies that are kind of around you and just helping you out here and there, and it actually feels kind of continual though. These feel more like they're just attracted to your overall energy because they sense this kind of fairy energy that you already have. So you definitely have a lot of fairy energy in your aura. So that's what's attracting that and those specific correspondences. There's also some kind of dragon energies around you as well. And there's a lifetime as this type of being also. Now this is not feeling extraterrestrial. Like there are obviously different types of reptoid extraterrestrials, whether it's the negative, we hear about the reptilians, or positive. This doesn't feel like an extraterrestrial race. This is feeling more like the mythical beast, like a dragon from another dimension. So this would be like another Earth dimension. And there's a feeling of other kind of beasts as well, unicorns, and different mythical kinds of animals. And this isn't feeling necessarily like you've had a lifetime as any of those. There's just energies that are generally attracted to being around you, and they kind of step in and out. These don't feel like guides. These almost feel more like totems, like temporary totems that come in here or there. And this again is just because they're attracted to your overall energy. So whereas most people, like, I'll read them and know you have, some standard animal. You have a gorilla totem around you. You've got an elephant or a squirrel or, a monkey or something. But you have a lot of more kind of mythical types of totems coming in. And the kind of more standard sort of totems that people can have around them would still typically be something more that we would associate with intuition and our feminine energy, psychic energy, like a cat or a crow, something like this. So still a kind of magical connection with the specific animals. Obviously, that's not to limit it or to say that you can't, come across a bear totem or a bird totem or something. That's just to say that generally speaking, um, this is what you typically attract to be around yourself. So a lot of magical energies, a lot of pushing boundaries and letting go of expectations, doing things spontaneously, relaxing, having a good time. That's what fairies are definitely about. And playing, but also achieving things, also breaking through barriers and obstacles, also learning lessons. Now you have one particular guide coming up, and this is feeling like a fairyish kind of guide too, but specifically, um, they identify with a kind of, or they're coming in with a kind of child's form. But this feels like a master guide. So master guides tend to step in when you need them, in a sense. They have contracted with you. They are a guide that is a standard, regular guide. They're on your team. They've contracted with you, but they don't always step in and do things like your primary guides would. They can kind of step back a little bit. They come in at specific times when we are ready for them. So when we're ready to learn um, a specific thing, when we're ready for another stage in our spiritual awakening, perhaps, or our own personal development, or there's some maybe a karmic lesson that we're learning, or it can even be a specific project or something that we are attempting to achieve and get done, depending on what we can learn through that and by that, or what we can achieve from that, and how that can help us. But with sort of general standard things, um, even if it's something like developing metaphysical abilities or something like that, usually it is one of your more primary guides that help with things like that. So master guides are more for helping us to learn life lessons or have realizations that are going to help us more ultimately. But this guide is pretty close to you right now. There's also not really a sense of this guide being female or male. So this guide is feeling more or less androgynous. They just feel like a child. But a child a lot of times hasn't necessarily come into gender, um, where they feel blocked or limited in a certain way because of a gender. So they can come across a little bit more formless if they're just coming to you with energy versus an actual physical form that you're seeing. So that might be part of it too. It might have a specific gender, but it just feels androgynous just because of this childlike nature where it's expressing everything as it is. It's not expressing anything in any kind of limited way, even a gender-based way, which can be a limitation. You can think I'm female, so I do these things because of that, or vice versa. I'm male, so I only do these things because of that. So you can end up with these kind of can't lists or shouldn't lists. And this guide doesn't have any of that. There is a sense of right and wrong in the sense of there's a sense of compassion and being compassionate and being kind to others and to yourself, and it's including plants and animals. And there's this very kind of safe, loved feeling coming from this fairy. And I almost said angel there for a second. I almost want to say angel, even though it's a fairy. So there's definitely a kind of angelic quality coming in with this being. Feeling very loving, very pure, very childlike, and really not having boundaries. Not having boundaries or structures that adults sort of face and have, or at least not in the same way. But at the same time, there is a sense that this is a very, very old being. And like I was saying before, it's identifying with this form or taking on this form as what it resonates with, uh, to sort of express how it feels, how it comes across. But at the same time, this is certainly a very old being. And it's also a very evolved being. So that's why it can step in as a master guide and help you with different spiritual lessons that you're going through, help you with your awakening process. And that's certainly something about a child. It can definitely help with an awakening process because, again, it's not stuck on logic like so many adults can be. It's accepting of truths. If something rings true, it doesn't have to be logical. It doesn't have to be presented in a certain way. It just speaks for itself because of the feeling of it and whether or not you resonate with it. Okay, and that's what it's calling itself. It's calling itself speaks true. And it's also referring to how children, not that they can't lie, but how children tend to speak true. They tend to speak the truth. They don't have these limits or barriers where they feel like something is wrong to say or something is appropriate to say or not. And so they just say whatever they think. They just say whatever they think and feel, whether you like it or not. And you can take it or leave it. And also, they have an imagination where they can come up with various things. And this guide, surprisingly, believe it or not, they actually help you with boundaries, with boundary setting, with speaking your truth, with identifying what that is, and with letting that up and with kind of letting your dragon energy come out when it needs to and be a little bit more aggressive or assertive when you need to be, and to stand in your own truth when that's appropriate, when that's what you need to do, and also to be quiet and to be still and to relax and let go. So this is another reason that this being is coming in a very androgynous way, not only because it's a child, but because of how balanced it is. Because it's definitely referring to both masculine and feminine energies here, and how we need this balance of both. And it's also putting it like we need to expand and we need to reach out, but we also need to release and let go and relax and play. And it's saying that we need to harness our potential by sitting still and simply realizing what it is. But then we also need to um, act accordingly to put that out, to seize our potential, to allow it to manifest and to grow into whatever it's going to become. So this being is saying that part of the reason it likes being presenting itself as a child, and part of the reason that it resonates with this specific identity and form and sort of belief systems, even in a sense, is because it's so limited, limitless. It hasn't become an adult yet. It hasn't become anything yet, in a sense. So it's very boundless. It's very free. It can look up at the stars and gaze at them and have this sense of all this opportunity that it hasn't lost yet. It hasn't wasted any time yet, because it's in this timeless childlike state where it can become anything. It can dream about anything, it can be anything, it can do anything. And that's the sense that it wants you to have for yourself, where you're a child and you're boundless and you're in this eternal, timeless state. But you also speak your truth and you know who you are. And so you can do anything out of that as well, just out of the fact that you know yourself, that you've established that connection with yourself. And that's mainly what this master guide teaches you, is simply to connect to who you are. Whatever various lessons that are coming through, however you learn that, in other words, or whatever face that takes on, it's saying that ultimately what it's helping you to know and value is to trust yourself and that connection, and to constantly be that and step more and more into that and into that knowing of who you are. So this is definitely the primary guide coming in and talking for this reading. Even though obviously you have others around you, it's not usually a master guide that does most of the talking during a reading. But in this case, again, because of what you are learning and going through and processing, this being has stepped up. Now you also have a dragon guide that is around you as well. And one of your primary guides is a fairy. And this feels like a female fairy. And this is kind of the standard sort of humanoid with wings that she's more coming in with. It seems like sometimes her skin kind of takes on different colors. And her wings also can change colors. Sometimes she's looking more Caucasian, but then it looks like I actually feel like that's a more of a reflection of you. It feels like she's more looking like your skin tone. But then she's kind of changing her skin color sometimes, but still, even though she has the ability to do that, which I'm sure obviously every fairy does, but even though she chooses to do that at times, still she is still kind of how you would think of a standard, typical looking fairy, where she's humanoid, she has wings. She's saying that she's petite, but at the same time, she's kind of seeming big at the same time. But probably in their world, they don't seem so small. Maybe that's really just in ours. Or she's saying, or maybe it depends on how they want to perceive themselves. But again, she's kind of adding to the same thing that the master guide was saying, which is that this reading, this theme is kind of focusing on your potential and harnessing that, and not having any limits, not limiting yourself, not even to a specific skin color or a specific race or set of beliefs or gender or age, not to any of those things. And there's this sort of universal sense of being universal, because when we step out of here, we don't have any of those things. We're just a spirit. It doesn't matter what body type we had when we were in the third dimension, experiencing this physical plane. We're not going to have that when we're over there. So black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, or whatever specific race that anyone comes in as. And this isn't anything that they have when they leave here. And so she's saying that every kind of um, negative belief or limitation, um, or a disconnection or separation that we hold so strongly here, that so many people do, that so many people are taught to perceive, judge others by their skin or their gender or their money or this or that. None of it matters anymore because we don't have any of those things. So she's saying that detaching from the physical is so important while you're in the physical. It doesn't mean that you don't accomplish different physical things. Obviously, you do, because you're in 3D land. You're operating as a human being, and obviously, you're meant to do that. You're meant to have those experiences and those achievements and even those failures, all those things. It's part of being human. Loss, creation, all those things that people can go through, sadness, happiness, and how things fluctuate. But she's saying that there's still this eternal sameness and stillness that we can call on. And the point is that even though you are in a physical world, realizing who you are. And when you realize that it doesn't matter and you don't have all these attachments to it, that's when you're able to really move forward in the physical realm. And that's when beliefs don't stop you anymore. That's when you don't associate negative beliefs with the physical realm. You realize that they're just ideas. So there's definitely another guide coming in as well. And that energy definitely switched when on the tail end there, when it was saying it's just ideas. There's definitely a male energy here coming up. Again, feeling very fairyish. Very fairyish, very masculine, but at the same time connected to this sort of dark, kind of feminine current. Now, I call it dark because you're going within yourself to access different psychic abilities, feminine abilities. And so I think of it as more like night versus day type of thing. And that's also more how it's been taught to me or communicated to me, as maybe you've seen in some of our videos. Some people have watched those old videos, some people haven't, so I don't know. But he definitely has this kind of night kind of current. And he feels a little bit more serious. But he still definitely has this kind of playful, mischievous fairy side as well. He's also got some kind of star connection going on here. This is almost feeling like a connection to Sirius. You definitely have some different star connections also. And these primary two guides are from fairy. And this is definitely, in some ways, really prominent in your aura. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like the origin. It just feels like you've had a lot of lifetimes there. Maybe you've had more lifetimes there even than you've had wherever you originated from. And so this is almost more kind of prominent in your energy field. But it does feel like there's some type of star seed, like a star seed type of origin. There's definitely a connection here with Lyra also and cat people. Now, this isn't talking about this guy. This is talking more about you and places that you've been, places where you've had lives. There's also a feeling of Orion as well and a lifetime there. That there's a Pleiadian feeling, but that feels a little bit more secondary or even thirdly. I don't feel like you've had as many lifetimes there. And then there's definitely a feeling of Arcturus as well. There's definitely a strong feeling of Arcturus. I almost want to say that that's the origin, just because it comes through so uh, prominently in some ways. But you still have these other star connections as well. Lyra definitely comes through in a strong way also. But also, not only that, but when just there's a feeling of Arcturus, um, where it's like when your guides are kind of giving me this feeling of your energy and the way that it feels, if I have to pinpoint almost like what is the sort of root of that or essence of that, I definitely want to say Arcturus. There's um, definitely that energy as this sort of core kind of feeling. But again, there are all these other star connections as well. So I would also say, or they're also suggesting to read up on Arcturus and sort of different like abilities and traits and things that they come in with. But they're also saying, but at the same time, realize that even if you originate from there at the same time, when you have this fairy energy so like kind of prominently in your energy field, that does sort of morph that a little bit. So you might want to read about fairies as well and fairy people as well. Or I should say fairy kin as well. But they're also saying not to get too wrapped up into this where it becomes limiting. But if you don't do that, it can actually be very unlimiting because you're realizing more aspects of you. You're realizing more aspects of yourself and who you are and what you can bring through. And so it can be less limiting. And that's the feeling that they want this knowledge to produce, not going backwards, going forwards. Sometimes forward movement does mean sitting and being still, because again, it's that sort of realization of who you are that allows you to move forward, that allows you to conquer everything as far as obstacles that need to break, belief structures, patterns, ideas that no longer serve you, and sort of breaking out of those molds that we have created for ourselves or even that someone else created for us. But it's all about, again, that balance, the balance of feminine and masculine that they keep coming across with. And if anything, I would say that this female fairy guide coming in, she still feels feminine, but at the same time, she definitely is exuding a lot of masculine energy. The same with this male guide. He definitely feels masculine, but at the same time, if I have to say this essence, it feels more like night. It feels more internal and more feminine and more psychic, whereas hers is a little bit more outward, and creative and expanding. Even though she's definitely psychic as well and has, you know, different fairy attributes and fairy abilities and what have you. Now, both of these are very psychic. There's a lot of psychic energies and abilities that can come from fairy lifetimes for sure. But then Arcturus as well. A lot of people with Arcturian energy, or especially as their origin, they have a lot of healing abilities. They can have psychic abilities as well. A lot of them come in and there's some kind of spiritual teacher, or they're a philosopher, or they're a healer, or they're doing something with psychic abilities, psychic in nature. Sometimes they take a more creative kind of approach as well, a more artistic kind of angle, but still, usually it's to get something, you could say, higher across, or spiritual across, some kind of understanding that they want to bring through with that. So you have this kind of double whammy sort of in your energy going on. So again, there's definitely a lot of potential with your psychic abilities, and they're intact, but they need to be sort of harnessed. They need to be used more. It's also feeling kind of like in the correct way, which um, some of that feels like acknowledging certain things that you do have or that you do know about yourself, and then just sort of taking that further and growing that. So identifying what you do have. And sometimes something might seem like really normal to you, like you've always had it. So you don't even necessarily realize that you're being intuitive or psychic or anything, or that you're communicating with a guide or whatever, because you've just sort of always done that, always had that. Um, and so sometimes you can almost assume everybody does that. Like for the longest time, I thought everybody dreams in color, until one day I find out that the majority of people have dreams in black and white. I've never had a dream in black and white in my entire life. So, not even to say that that means anything, but just as a sort of point, like you never know what is actually something that everybody experiences, or something that you're doing that is um, just something that not everybody is doing or experiencing, or that not everybody has. Or then in some cases that most people don't have, that most people are not experiencing. So with your less primary guides, but still like core members of your team, so there tends to be two primary guides, and it's always a female and a male. Once in a while, like extremely rarely, like a couple of times out of like thousands of readings, or hundreds at least that I've done, probably thousands by now, but um, on like a very, very, very rare occasion, there has been one guide who's come in as an androgynous being, and they were the primary guide versus having two, a female and a male. Um, but everybody has more than two that are like a core group around them. And these other members around you, now this dragon guide, this is feeling like one of your primary guides as well. Or sorry, not primary, but one of your core guides, okay? On the small team that you would have around you. But you definitely have like an Arcturian guide as well, who isn't really coming up, not really revealing themselves, and you probably possibly have some other star guides with you also. I definitely have a feeling that there are some others, but they're not really coming up revealing themselves, but also they're not the two primary guides, obviously, but they are like core members of this small group of guides that you have around you. Okay, so that is all that your guides have to say for this reading. Thank you so much for allowing me to do this reading for you. I truly hope that it benefits you. Thank you very much. Namaste.